Hello, fellow featherbrains. I'm Bree Wizard, and today I'll be answering a few of the most common questions you're likely to have about getting your chickens through the winter safely and comfortably. These questions came from my viewers recently, but I get these same questions year after year after year. So, for example, how cold is too cold? When should you heat your coop? Should you insulate your coop? How can you best ventilate your coop to keep heat in but still have good airflow? So, let's get started. Okay, first question is from Esther. Hi, Esther. And she asks, at what temperature do I start thinking about getting a heat source such as a sweeter heater? So, this, of course, is a variation of the age old question how cold is too cold for chickens? This is an extremely controversial question, but he is so loud. I'm going to come at all of these questions from the perspective of what your chickens want rather than the more common perspective of what your chickens can endure. You can find that elsewhere. I'm going to give you two answers. The first is the absolute minimum temperature that's safe for healthy, cold hardy chickens before putting in a heater. And the second answer is what temperature your chickens actually want you to put in a heater, which is a very different question. So, first answer to how cold is too cold. Minimum temperature, 32 degrees. It's that straightforward. This is simply because at 32 degrees, your chickens are at risk for frostbite, which is just as horrifically painful for them as it would be for me or for you. And that's why I say anything below freezing is just too cold, too risky. A lot of people will tell you that the cold doesn't cause frostbite, moisture does. That's a myth. Moisture, of course, is a contributing factor, as is the wind, which in our coops usually comes in the form of drafts. So we do want to work on reducing both of those. But frostbite cannot occur above 32 degrees. Temperature is the primary factor, moisture and drafts are secondary. So keep in mind that your coop may be warmer than the outdoors. So, depending on your setup, perhaps your coop is as much as 10 or 15 degrees warmer than the outdoors. Or it could be the same as the outdoors if you've got lots of ventilation, for example. But 32 degrees in the coop is too cold. It's time for a heater. Also, keep in mind that coops tend to cool down a lot at night. So, just because your coop may be a lot warmer than the outdoors during the day, it could still be dropping down to outdoor temperatures at night or close to. You'll need to measure that with the thermometer. For a safe heat source, I do highly recommend sweeter heaters. Whenever people tell you how unsafe it is to heat your coop, those arguments do not apply to sweeter heaters. None of them. You can just ignore them. If you want more info on that, I'll link to a video on that topic below. And the second answer for how cold is too cold from your chicken's perspective this time, well, it's definitely going to depend on the breed, the strain, and even the individual chicken. Some foo-foo breeds can't handle the cold at all. Other breeds who were bred for cold climates, like the Chanticleer, for example, they'll do a lot better. But in general, chickens want to live within or near their thermoneutral zone, which is about 60 to 75 degrees for your average chicken, give or take. Once they get out of that thermoneutral zone, they have to work a lot harder to regulate their body temperature. In winter, that can mean things like eating a lot more, shivering, huddling up, and being inactive. The further away your chickens are from that temperature zone of about 60 to 75 degrees, the more uncomfortable they are. So, if you're a little outside of it, they adjust pretty well. But the further you go, the tougher it is. I've seen in my chickens when the temperature drops below about 60, sometimes even in the 60s if they're used to warm weather. Some of them start acting already like they're uncomfortably cold. And I'm talking about cold hardy breeds here. Cold hardy does not mean cold happy, it simply means they can endure. My chicken Elvira here, she shivers nonstop even in the 50s. She's always been highly susceptible to the cold. My other Americanas are a whole lot tougher, but you will see individual variation and you'll need to take that into account. So I turn the heater on in the fall when the temperature drops into the 50s so my chickens are able to warm up when they need to. And I do find that overall they're much more active during the day just from being able to come in and warm up on occasion, and that's especially true the colder it gets. So you could either do what I do, plug that heater in when the temperature drops to the 50s, or you can just keep an eye on how they're acting and turn that heater on when you see they're showing signs of cold inactivity, fluffing the feathers, standing on one foot, shivering, closing their eyes, things like that. Or you can wait till it's around freezing and turn that heater on then. But the simple truth is, if your chickens look cold, they are cold.
She's wrapped in my coat as best as I can get her. And with the hand I'm using on the phone, I've been putting on her feet, which has warmed them up, and she has finally stopped shivering. How Vi? Pretty girl. Oh.
Question number 2 comes from Sam. Hi, Sam, who asks, should you insulate your chicken coop for cold winters? Short answer, yes. But this can be a little bit of a tough question because, as far as I know, there haven't been any studies on how much insulation can warm a coop, depending on the ventilation you have. Because if you don't have a ton of ventilation, insulating is going to keep your coop a whole lot warmer than if you do have a ton of ventilation. One of my older coops, for example, it was insulated, but it had so much ventilation that it wasn't that much warmer than the outside. It was pretty close. But this coop here, which is very large, it has very little ventilation, and so that insulation helps a lot. Also, if you have a smaller coop, insulation is going to keep it warmer still because it'll better hold in some of that body heat your chickens produce in that smaller space. And of course, the more chickens you have, the more heat is produced, and insulation can really help make a huge difference in keeping that heat inside. All that to say, in some circumstances, insulation can make an enormous difference in keeping the coop warm, but in others, not so much. Regardless of all that, I still recommend insulation if you're able to, no matter what your setup, because even in the worst case scenario, as far as the cold is concerned, where you have a lot of ventilation, a large coop, not a lot of chickens in it, the coop is still likely to retain more heat than if it's not insulated. And when it's really cold, even just that little bit warmer in that coop will be very much welcomed by your birds. That's my view anyway.
Time to start insulating.
Question number 3, also from Sam and closely related. What's the best ventilation for your coop in the winter? So there's a couple of things to keep in mind with winter ventilation. One is how much you really need, and 2 is where in the coop you should put it so your chickens don't freeze to death. Because if you don't have enough ventilation, your coop is going to get choked up with dust and dander and moisture and ammonia and bad smells and pathogens. And your chickens are going to, at worst, get sick, even die, and at best, be completely miserable. But on the other hand, if you have a huge amount of ventilation and the temperatures are really low, your chickens are going to, at worst, lose appendages to frostbite and possibly even freeze to death, and at best, be completely miserable. For any newbies out there, do not listen to anyone who tells you to use an open-walled coop in bitter cold climates. These are coops that have 3 walls and then one wall is just hardware cloth or something comparable. Chickens freeze to death in those coops all the time. Don't fall prey to people trying to sell you on that lie. If it sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true. So let's start with how much ventilation your coop will need in the winter. This is going to depend on a few different factors. This first one, and this is huge, what type of bedding are you using? We're going to talk about sand bedding here, and then we're going to talk about organic bedding and also the deep litter method. If you're using sand bedding, you can get away with very little ventilation. Sand bedding is wonderful for winter for that reason. And this is just because sand doesn't hold on to moisture. It stays very dry. Poop dries out in sand. The bacterial load, which is responsible for a lot of the ammonia production and bad smells you get in coops, it's incredibly low in sand compared to other types of bedding. So let me show you how little ventilation I have in this coop here.
Are you going just hanging out? Yeah. Are you gonna hang out in the warm coop? Oop. Just gonna hang out in the warm coop? That's allowed.
I have this up here at the top, and I have these holes in the wall here. So I have a separate video on this setup that I'll link to. But on the other side of this wall here is the room where we store my solar batteries. I'm off grid here. And we have a pellet stove that heats that battery room. We have a fan that blows, that you can hear, that blows warm air from the battery room into this coop. That's how I heat this coop. If I didn't have that air flowing in, then I would need ventilation up on this side of the wall as well. I would just have a matching ventilation hole like this one. I also have the pop door down here that adds a lot of ventilation during the day when it's open.
Hello, Elma. Yeah.
Although very soon I'm going to test covering that up with plastic strips like a dog door, chicken door, simply to keep it warmer in there, hold in more of the heat. I'll let you know how that goes. But that's all the ventilation I need with my setup because of the sand bedding. You can see it's really not that much. Additionally, because I have these dropping boards here where I do every day or two remove the night perch poops from the coop. The more you're removing poop from your coop, the less ventilation you need. So, with that in mind, let's talk about organic bedding like wood shavings, hemp, or straw. If you're replacing the bedding frequently, like every week, maybe two, you can get away with less ventilation. You'll still need more than with sand, but you can get away with less than deep litter simply because you're removing all the poop, ammonia, bacteria, moisture, on and on from the coop every week or two. If you are, on the other hand, using the deep litter method like so many people do, you're going to need a lot of ventilation. Deep litter adds tons of moisture, poop, ammonia, bacteria, decomposing litter to the coop. You get a lot of all of that in the air, small particles of that in the air, and you need a large amount of airflow, fresh air in, stale air out, to keep your coop healthy and fresh. So when you see these ventilation estimates online for how you need what sometimes appears to be just insane amounts of ventilation, those estimates are generally for people using the deep litter method or for coops that don't offer a lot of space per chicken and with little to no poop removal. I want to show you this coop I used to use. You can see it had ventilation up top on the front of the coop and the back. It also had windows, but those were closed in the winter to keep drafts from blowing across the chickens. But these top ventilation holes and the pop door, they weren't enough when I tried to use the deep litter method in that coop. So this was a 10 by 10 coop, my first winter with chickens. I had 26 chickens in there, I think. I tried the deep litter method, and no matter how much I turned the litter, added more, whatever, it just didn't smell right. Maybe there were too many chickens in there, I don't know. But I had to abandon the deep litter method that year. And instead, I started replacing the wood shavings bedding every week or two. And this amount of ventilation worked fine for that. And then the following spring, I put sand bedding in my coop and never looked back. But if you're doing the deep litter method, I suggest putting ventilation holes above your chicken's head as far as you can, like this, or this, or this, and then play by ear. You can always add more ventilation holes if you're not able to keep the ammonia or the smells under control. Which brings me to the second part of ventilation. It does need to be as far above your chicken's heads as you can get it, because if it's lower down, it will cause drafts. And if you've ever seen chickens roosting on a cold night, they fluff their feathers out, which allows them to trap their warm body heat and hold it against their bodies to stay warm. But if there's a draft, it's going to remove all that heat that they're trying to hold in, and they could be in a world of trouble. The open pop door does cause a draft. I've found in my coops that having it open during the day does remove a lot of the heat from the coop. I've always closed my pop doors at night, so there are no drafts at night when my chickens are roosting. But as I said before, I'm going to experiment with covering the pop door with a plastic dog door this winter. That's something you could try too to keep the coop warmer, and your nose will tell you if you need that extra daytime pop door ventilation or not. On to question 4, which comes from Fabian. Hi, Fabian, who asks if the noise of fans is stressful or harmful to chickens in any way. I've insulated my 2 small chicken coops for the winter, and to compensate for the ventilation, I've installed small electric fans. They make a bit of noise, and even though it seems light to me, I'm always afraid it might stress my hens. Can this regular noise disturb the hens' sleep? So, there actually was a paper that came out last year that reviewed the studies that have been done on how noises, like those coming from machinery or fans, how they affect chickens. And the research suggests that as long as the noise isn't really loud, it doesn't seem to affect them very much. There are clear adverse effects if continuous noises are 90 decibels or louder. When I Googled how loud are fans, the answer I got was somewhere between 20 to 70 decibels, with huge industrial fans being 70 decibels or louder. So, Fabian, I doubt your small electric fans could be anywhere near that. I think if it doesn't seem that loud to you and your chickens don't appear to be bothered, it's probably not bothering them too much. Additionally, the research does seem to suggest that chickens become habituated to noises pretty easily if they're not too loud, which also suggests your fans aren't bothering them. They're used to them. So that's good news for both of us, as I also use fans for airflow in my coop.
Hey girls! Hey Maggie. All right, time to do some spot cleaning in here. You can see Elvira separated because of some health problems, so she's separated by order of the vet.
If you're watching this video and you're a bit confused that I'm saying things that go against a lot of the conventional advice, you'll want to watch this video here or linked below, which debunks the most popular myths about chickens in the winter. Good luck and happy chickening!